important weekend at Donington Park for Andrea Locatelli, because his weekend in Misano was pretty poor by the standards he's set over the course of this season so far. Was not at the races in race 1 at all. He was particularly poor outside of the top 10 on genuine pace. Perked up a bit on Sunday, but as I've said, started the season so strongly, and with that consistent run of top 5 finishes as well that stretched all the way until race 2 in Barcelona, when it was ended with a 7th place. And also because Donington Park has been a low-yielding circuit for Locatelli. The last 2 seasons, they've been among his poorest races, his poorest scoring weekend, certainly here at the UK round. So if he's to prove that the opening rounds of this season were a genuine step forward in performance, he's got to bounce back from Misano quite quickly, and he's got to show an improvement here at Donington Park, where he's struggled for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and that could be quite tough whenever you consider that top rack's going to be very strong. We know Ray and Lowe's always go well here at Donington. You throw in Scott Redding's been in the mix every year at Donington in the past. Can the BMW make a bit of a step? Tom Sykes, obviously, on the BMW's had a lot of success here in the past. There's a lot of guys that are going to think this can be the weekend where it turns for me. Locatelli, on the other hand, might be thinking in terms of, I've got to make sure I come away with top 8 finishes rather than the top 5s that he had been aiming for at the start of the season. Yes,
and top 8 was a realistic prospect in Misano. Really was able to dig in for race 2 in particular with that 6th position finish. But the odd one was race 1, because he was just nowhere, and we haven't seen that kind of situation for Locatelli at any stage this season. Did go through a bit of a patch at one stage last year, didn't he, where his performances dropped a little. But Andrea Locatelli did hit the ground running at the start of this season.
Yeah, it's all about trying to be as consistent as possible whenever you're trying to make that step. But for someone like Locatelli, the goal is probably to find that little bit more on the really good weekends, just to turn a third into a second into a win. And then on the bad weekends, make sure you're coming away with top 10 finishes, points in all 3 races, and avoid making mistakes. And that's what Locatelli's been able to do this year. I think Misano probably was a little bit of a surprise to everyone just because of how strong he had been for the rounds leading up to it.
So it is Locatelli who leads your wet weather standings in free practice 2. 1 minute 41.3 for him, ahead of Shireen, Baldassari, Egata and Granado, the other riders out on track. Good to see Eric Granado back in the Superbike paddock this weekend. Obviously had his crash at Catalonia. He was quite keen to be back somewhat sooner than he ultimately was allowed to. Doctors ruled him out of Misano, ruled him unfit, but he has been back for the last few weekends in Moto.
Yeah, and obviously in Moto we've seen him a very strong rider in recent years, and for Granado, you just kind of hope that we're able to see something from him on that MIE Honda through the course of this year. It's a team that I think are trying to push what they have with the package and get the results that they need, but it's tough whenever you got 2 riders with pretty limited Superbike experience. Obviously for Granado, this is his rookie campaign in WorldSBK, and for Hafish, you're looking at 2nd year on the bike and trying to make a step.
Yes, Granado, you said he's been going pretty well. Winner of the 2nd race of the Italian Grand Prix, so straight back in after a month out and able to put in a performance. Obviously showing no ill effects of that spill, despite being forced to miss the visit to Misano. So now it's he's got to continue as if he's never been away, really. Missing out on 1 round, but getting a lot of extra bike time elsewhere makes up for the absence. Whereas if he were only doing Superbikes, you would have effectively been off bike altogether for 2 months.
I think one of the things for Granado is he'll also know that he's under a bit of pressure as well. You've got Taz McKenzie in the Supersport team for MIE. He's ridden the Superbike. He's been out on the factory HRC bike at Suzuka 8-hour testing. So for that team, they might well view it that someone like McKenzie might be the rider that they're really interested in bringing forward going forward. But there's obviously big decisions that they'll need to make. So for both riders on the bike right now, Hafish here you see on the number 35 machine, and Eric Granado we saw on the 51, they'll know that they need to start getting themselves a bit closer to those points-paying battles.
Well, I think Shireen's done a decent job in that regard this season, because he's walked away with 7 championship points, same score as Baldassari. Went further back down the championship standings, of course. We've had quite a clear top 16 riders. We've said that regularly in sessions. There's been usually a gap behind the top 16 of about half a second then to the rest of the group. But Shireen's picked up at least 1 point at every round this season. He struggled by comparison in 2022. So if not the package, then the rider certainly has looked to have made a bit of a move forward in 2023. Hafiz Shireen.
Yeah, it's the progress you need to make, but is it enough? And that's the question MIE Honda are going to need to ask themselves. Is it enough to have a rider on the bike that's making improvements, but are they going to get to the level you need them to get to be competitive in the class? And that's the kind of decision that all teams have to make, whether it's Ducati at the front of the field with their decision for the second rider out there, or if you're a bike and a team further down the field, what can you do to make yourself more competitive?
Well, we've been saying it's the shortest lap of the season, but it's not when you're running in the 1 minute 40s, is it? Andrea Locatelli, 1 minute 41 last time around. Riders just making their way through the second sector now, but the checkered flag has already fallen, so this will be their final laps.
Shortest lap of the season, the longest session of the season for the teams. Because they've had so limited running during this session with the conditions as they are. This makes it exciting for us for the weekend, though, because we'll go into free practice 3 tomorrow, short session, half an hour to try and get yourself as much time as possible out there, and then you're straight into a Super Pole session and then into the races. So this is one of those weekends where it's almost like you're going straight in as a Saturday, Sunday race weekend, because you've had only 20 laps at the most really on the course of Friday's running. For a lot of teams and riders it might only be 15 laps, so it's going to be really interesting to see what everyone's able to do tomorrow. Must admit, I'd quite like that. I think Friday gives us spoils too many secrets about what the weekend is going to hold. But there we go. That's my petition for the seasons to come. Checkered flag fallen. The riders just making their way now across the line. Lorenzo Baldassari, Eric Granado, and Dominic Egerter all on for personal bests in this afternoon's session. Baldassari finishes with a 1:43.634. Hafiz Shireen crosses the line, 1 minute 42.6 for him. A couple of tenths of a second slower than his fastest time of the session. Granado 1:43.8 and Egerter 1:43.9. So that's a wrap on free practice 2. What did you want to add, Steve? Well, I was going to say that the format of Formula 1 obviously did a Saturday Sunday weekend at one stage, and it was exciting to see who would adapt the quickest, and that's where tomorrow is going to be a little bit like that for us as well. Obviously we had some running this morning, but we've had spots of rain all the way through today, and the lap times have been fast. 27s at Donington Park are always a quick lap time, but there's a lot more lap time to be found, and obviously the last second to find is the toughest one. We saw for BSB when they came here a month ago, they found a second compared to their fastest times in the past. So we'll certainly expect to see really quick lap times in the Super Pole session, but there's a lot of time for the teams to try and find solutions before that. But how much data and information do they really have that they can count on from this session?